Good evening and welcome to our Meet the Makers series. My name is Ed Stever, and I am the president of the National Foundation of Swallowing Disorders. I'm also a head and neck cancer survivor and was diagnosed with severe dysphagia 17 years ago in 2007. Our goal with the Meet the Makers series is to offer our community access to those who have created products specifically for people with swallowing disorders. This series is not meant to be promotional, but rather informational. We want to give you the opportunity to ask the creators of these products your questions, learn more about how these products help people with swallowing difficulties, and make connections so that you feel appreciated among our industry partners. We thank you for joining us and hope you find the series to be helpful. Thank you to those of you who donated with your registration or who have become members. It is only with your financial support of our community that we continue to further our mission. The makers in this series are volunteering their time to share this information. They have not paid to participate in the series, nor was it required that they be a past or current financial sponsor of the foundation. If you have participated in a webinar from NFOSD previously, you are likely familiar with our format. You will be muted throughout the presentation, but are encouraged to ask questions at any point during the presentation. There's 30 minutes reserved on the call for questions, so please don't be shy about asking. We will record the presentation and make it available on our website within the next few days. No CEUs are provided. You will receive a certificate of participation following the broadcast. Remind you that tonight's broadcast is for informational and educational purposes. Both the Foundation and tonight's speakers do not intend to provide any patient-specific diagnostic or treatment advice or recommendations. If you need assistance identifying a swallowing specialist, please provide.
Ed, do you mind if I
email? And now, no, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. Ed's internet is a little bit choppy tonight, so I'll take over here. I know Ed would like to introduce tonight's speakers, but I'm also glad that I get the opportunity to do this. So Bennett Blakeman is the CEO of Pharmaceuticals, the company that manufactures Aquoral protective oral spray. He's a serial entrepreneur with interests in several areas. He's also the founder of Queen Bee Foundation, a 501c3 organization dedicated to raising awareness for ALS. Jessica is a speech-language pathologist and board-certified swallowing specialist. She works at the Mayo Clinic in Arizona, where she established the first multidisciplinary swallowing clinic within the Mayo Clinic system with her ENT and gastroenterology colleagues to provide the best collaborative care for complex dysphagia cases. She also runs a support group for people with total laryngectomies. And with that, I'll turn this over here to Bennett and Jessica. You're welcome to further introduce yourselves, and thank you for sharing information about xerostomia and Aquoral with us. Thank you both for volunteering your time and expertise this evening. So give us just 1 second here, and I'll flip this over to make you the presenter here. And Ed, I'm sorry that your internet gave out. All right, so Bennett, you should see.
Yep.
Pop up there.
Okay, you just tell me when, Elizabeth.
All right, I don't see your screen yet.
I've got a prompt to stop sharing my screen.
I see it.
Oh, okay, excellent. If Ed sees it, take it away. It's
Okay.
probably something on my end.
Ed, thank you very much. Elizabeth, thank you very much. Thank you to the entire National Foundation of Swallowing Disorders, and to everyone that's joining us. I would like to say good afternoon, good evening, and my understanding is we might have participants upwards of 18 different countries, so perhaps good morning to some of you. My name is Bennett Blakeman. As Elizabeth said, I'm the CEO of Pharmaceuticals. We're the proud manufacturer of Aquoral Protective Oral Spray. We relaunched this product back in June of 2023, and I'll get into a little bit of the history a little later in the presentation. From Pharmaceuticals standpoint, our mission is really to deliver or bring back a little bit of normal for patients. And how are we doing so is through empowerment. Empowerment exists through education, and we take that very seriously, both from a clinical perspective, but also from a patient perspective. Advocating for clear communication between patients and all of their providers. I can't tell you how many patients we have the luxury of talking to that will tell us very frankly, I love my dentist, I love my oncologist, I love my primary care physician, my nurse, my hygienist, my speech language pathologist, but none of them talk to each other. So really maintaining that patients can be the ones that can bridge those communication lines and deliver the messages that they're getting from each provider to the other providers to make sure that they're getting well-rounded treatment. And then finally, establishing Aquoral or really any dry mouth treatment that you find to be working for yourself as an integral part of a successful xerostomia and ultimately overall oral health regimen. Xerostomia and overall health, I don't need to tell this audience where dry mouth necessarily comes from. I think there's more power in some of the statistics that really allow us to feel and recognize that we're not alone. In just the United States, data is suggesting that 1 in 5 adults are suffering from dry mouth. Granted, to varying degrees, but when you're talking about a patient population of 65 million people, that's a lot of people. And the largest reason that creates that dry mouth effect is the result of polypharmacy or medication side effects. I think from a patient perspective, the easy things to start to identify when we're suffering from dry mouth are our everyday activities that we therefore take for granted, such as eating, tasting, swallowing, having a conversation, or sleeping end up being 5 of the top things that we hear from patients. But from a clinical perspective, what we know is the ramifications of untreated dry mouth can really create major changes in the oral microbiome, increased risk of dental carie, of tooth decay, gingivitis, dysphagia, and so on become important talking points that clinicians need to have with patients so that they understand why treating their dry mouth is so much more than just treating their dry mouth by virtue of drinking something as simple as water. We've got a couple poll questions here. one for patients and one for healthcare professionals. Elizabeth, you want to take this one away?
Yep, let me launch the poll here. Excellent. So you should see a question on your screen, and you can answer both from the patient perspective, if that's applicable to you, or from the healthcare provider. So the question here, it says, what's the worst issue you experienced due to dry mouth? And we've had about 15% of people vote. I'll wait until we get a little more here. I'll give you about 5 more seconds to put in your vote, and then I'll share the results. All right, almost everybody has voted here. So I'm going to close the poll and let me share this with everybody. All right, and Bennett, I don't know if you can see this from your end, but it looks like almost 60% answered swallowing is the worst issue that they experience. And then about a similar result between eating, speech, and sleeping.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Is my screen back up?
Yep.
Perfect. Actually, thank you even more so for repeating the poll results right there. I left out an important data point when talking about the wide prevalence of dry mouth. The other data that we're seeing is exactly what showed up in the poll tonight, which is 60% of people who start with xerostomia then subsequently are suffering from dysphagia. So the group that's joining us tonight is exactly in line with everything that we're also seeing from a worldwide data point. So pretty interesting that this small subsidy of people is falling right in line with everything that we're seeing. So as we started, Aquoral is our product. It is a prescription strength dry mouth product that, again, we relaunched in June of 2023. I say relaunched because it was originally approved by the FDA back in 2006 as a 510K, which means it falls in this medical device category, not a drug category. But what that also means is it's non-systemic. There's no contraindications. And I'm anticipating this question coming at some point. There are no reported side effects. Excuse me. It was commercially launched more formally in 2013 by Mission Pharmaceuticals. They had a urinary tract product that had a high propensity to cause dry mouth, so they thought this would be a nice addition to their portfolio. They then subsequently sub-licensed it to 3M. I'm sure that company name will resonate with most people. They do a lot more than just Post-its. They have a very robust dental line, and they took on the product, subsequently renaming it as xerostomia relief spray. Unfortunately, given the broad spectrum of products that they had in their portfolio, they unfortunately opted to give up on Aquoral or xerostomia relief spray. This is for both Mission and 3M. And then where we came into play is we partnered with the same direct mail pharmacy that was dispensing for both companies, and it was the patients who were calling in either crying or screaming at the call center because the product was no longer available that really made us realize this was more of a marketing issue and a patient access issue than it was a product issue. Excuse me. So we went down the road of filing for the patent and the North American distribution rights, not changing the formula with the FDA and going back to the same manufacturers in France who were previously putting the product together, thinking that we had a good product and we just needed to get it back to market as fast as possible. So what ultimately makes Aquoral different? It is that patented OGT technology, that's oxygized glycerol triesters. That is a fancy way of saying oxygenated corn oil at the end of the day. That throughout that oxygenation process, the corn oil becomes a fatty-like substance, so it is a lipid-based formula, meaning it's lipophilic, so it binds to the oral mucosa, but then it's also hydrophobic. It's waterproof. So after administering a treatment to yourself or to your loved one, for the caregivers that are joining us tonight, They can feel free to have a bite of food, a drink of water, a conversation like we are tonight, and not fear needing to having their treatment washed away and require continuous reapplication. So the product lubricates just like all other dry mouth solutions, but it moisturizes, but ultimately its differentiator is that it protects. So by binding to the oral tissue and hydrating, it then also creates a protective layer to protect the overall oral cavity. This not only provides rapid relief, but also sustained relief that patients are continuously reporting for up to 4 to 6 hours. Excuse me again, I'm sorry, I'm battling a little something here, but I think the best, or my favorite testimonial, I should say, from a patient, from a layman's terms comparison's sake, was that it's like chapstick for the inside of your mouth. And we've all put chapstick on chapped lips and know how good that feels. So this is a fairly good comparative, there we go, comparison to make. Comparing Aquoral to other solutions, both from an over-the-counter point of view, but also from a prescription standpoint, the effectiveness of Aquoral has been clinically tested to be superior from an efficacy standpoint. Again, this is not to say that if you like your over-the-counter solution or you're on a prescription product that is working, that you should be racing to necessarily make a change. We're just trying to point out the differences that have shown up in the clinical trials that have been previously run. It is convenient and discreet. At the end of the day, it's about the size of an oversized chapstick container, or what I like to affectionately refer to as Banaka. I know it's not on the market anymore, but for those of us who are old enough, we all remember how well that product was marketed and how widespread it was. So it's very convenient. It fits in your pocket, it fits in your purse, in the center console of your car, your bedside table. Whereas a lot of the over-the-counter solutions, when bought in bulk for savings at the patient's level, come in those 33-ounce mouthwash size bottles, which will require transferring to something that is a little easier to travel with. But I think more importantly, excusing yourself if you're in a public setting to swish and spit the product. It's not something that would be done at a dinner party, in a crowded restaurant, or of the like. And the calcium phosphate product is very similar in the sense that it requires swishing and spitting. It also requires mixing on the patient's perspective. It comes in something about the size of a sugar packet that requires it to be torn open, put in water, mixed together, and then ultimately swished and spit in your mouth. I'm not sidestepping cost. I have a better slide later in the presentation that I think will better articulate Aquoral's cost in comparison to other things, but I do want to touch on taste. First and foremost, taste is the most objective thing, and I would strongly urge any patient to not downplay any product that they feel like just doesn't taste right. Ours is intentionally more benign. It's a subtle grapefruit mint. Now, every time I say that, I get people's puzzled look on their face. I promise it's not like drinking orange juice after you've brushed your teeth. But in comparison to some of the other products that have very robust mint or spearmint or citrus flavors that are intended to be present to try and stimulate salivary flow, what we also hear from those patients is a significant amount of taste fatigue, to the point that they give up on using the treatment because they just can't handle it being in their mouth. And then from the calcium phosphate product standpoint, because it requires mixing on the spot and then quick administration into your mouth, many patients will complain of a gritty or chalky tasting or a lot of residue that's left on their teeth as a result of the treatment. And then I've got another poll question here for everyone.
All right. Just launched.
That second question too is we're encouraging everyone to write their answers in. It's not a multiple choice.
All right, I'll give people a few more seconds here to vote, and then I'll share the results for the first poll question of, do you feel that your dry mouth is being well managed? All right, I'm going to close it here, and let me share the results with everybody. Almost 50-50, so 54% said no, they don't feel that their dry mouth is being well managed. And I'm going to hide this here so it pulls up your screen again. And I don't think that we saw the second question. So if you want to go back one slide, Bennett, was there a second part to that?
Just what product they're currently using, either successfully or unsuccessfully.
Got it. Excellent. If you want to type that into the chat and share that, you're welcome to. There's somebody that's on the call that said they're using Aquoral and also Xylomelts to manage dry mouth. We have some biotin. Excellent. All right. Yep, so we have Aquoral, more Xylomelts, biotin. Good, I'll let you keep going here.
Okay, perfect. Just to touch on the difference quickly between Xylomelts and Aquoral or biotin, things in those over-the-counter categories that I was really alluding to in the comparison chart. So Xylomelts, it's important to point out, is a saliva stimulant, whereas Aquoral is a saliva substitute. So it's intended to help replace saliva that's no longer there for comfort and healing, whereas Xylomelts, if you still have salivary flow or active salivary glands, even in a diminished fashion, are intended to really put them back on steroids, if you will, and get them active again. I mentioned the data that that Aquoral has been tested against other products, and so I just want to show a couple quick graphs here. This first one is in regards to the coefficient of friction. The higher the coefficient of friction, the drier the mouth. And while I think it's easy to notice the difference between Aquoral and the other products on here, what I think is better understood to compare is on the left here, and I'm not sure if you can see my mouse or not, but water is sort of this base. You've got then water-based sprays, gels, and the calcium phosphate rinse that we talked about on the previous slide as well. So they're all very close to water, which makes sense since those products have water as their leading ingredient. And then when you go to this more lipid-based solution, patients were finding that their mouths were becoming more hydrated as a result. So we talked about its ability to moisturize, but then its ability to protect and trap that moisture in. Again, another graph showing the control of water in comparison to water-based sprays, rinses, and gels, that the product tested better in that category as well. Clinical data is great, but I think what's even more powerful is real-world evidence. Real-world evidence in this case as measured by surveys of patients who were on water-based solutions and then tried Aquoral after the fact, and 92% saw an improvement in their dry mouth symptoms. And I think even more so for this particular audience, 65% of the patients said Aquoral was enhancing their ability to swallow. I'd like to just tell one quick story on that statistic specifically. We do a lot of work with the Sjogren's Foundation, and we've had the luxury of talking to several of their patients. One in particular, extreme xerostomia, like her mouth was bleeding as a result of the graduated effects that the Sjogren's disease has had on her. She was on the road with her husband. They peeled off the side of the highway to grab a bite to eat. I believe it was McDonald's. She's become very accustomed to having to sip water or Coke or something along with every bite of food to make sure that it in fact went down safely. And in this case, she was distracted. She took a bite of her hamburger. She swallowed it, had that immediate moment of panic, and then realized it did in fact go down smoothly. She was not choking, and credited it to her, at that point, about 8 weeks of treatment on Aquoral, to helping that near episode. And I think this is my last couple poll questions, and then I'm really looking forward to introducing everyone to Jessica.
Excellent. I'll let people answer that chat question first. So if you're a healthcare professional, how many patients do you see with xerostomia every month? You can just put in your best estimate with that. And then I'll pull up a poll question here, asking whether you feel like you have good treatment options for your patients. So I'll launch that here. Feel free to keep answering in the chat. But here's that yes/no poll for you. So do you feel like you have good treatment options for dry mouth for your patients? And while people are responding to that, I'll just read some of the answers from the healthcare providers saying that they see 10 patients a month, 10 to 12 on average, approximately 20. Excellent. And then I'm going to close this poll here so that you can see these results. So healthcare professionals, 92% of them say that they don't feel like they have good treatment options for dry mouth for their patients.
Wow, that is a startling number.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I introduce Jessica, I'm hoping we can dive a little deeper into that poll question. So in an effort to get there as fast as possible, I promise I've got just a couple more slides. How to get the most out of your Aquoral when you initially get it. Giving it a really good aggressive shake just ensures all of the ingredients compound the way that we want to. This is a pump spray, not an aerosol. So you may have to prime it a couple times before the spray ultimately comes out. The label suggests that a dose is 2 sprays, but given the ingredients and the lack of contraindications and it being non-systemic, if one wants to use 3 or 4 as an initial dose, no harm will be found as a result. What we do really encourage people to do, though, is making sure that they make good use of their tongue and spread it around their mouth to make sure that they get to the infected areas, or the affected areas, I should say. And while we're obviously highlighting this product as a dry mouth treatment, going back to the story with our Sjogren's patients and everyone fighting dysphagia tonight, the reality is spraying it in the back of your throat and allowing it to adhere to the tissues in your throat, much like it would in your mouth, will have the same pro effects that we are looking for. And then finally, as I alluded to, the convenient on-the-go application slides right back into your pocket or your purse, and no one is the wiser. As I said on one of the initial slides, we want Aquoral or any dry mouth treatment that's ultimately working for you to be an integral part of your treatment regimen. Some quick highlights: Aquoral can be used alone as a single agent. I'm actually really thrilled, Elizabeth, that you read the answer to that someone gave, that they're using Xylamelts in addition to Aquoral. That is a great way to look at this product as well. It can be used in conjunction with other products that you are liking and start prolonging the effects that we're getting, and therefore spreading out some of the financial toxicity, if you will, that these products all inevitably cause. There's no mixing, there's no swishing and spitting. We've talked about the discretion, and then a lot of great success for those at bedtime, not having to continuously rise to hydrate and therefore rise again to use the restroom and getting a poor night's sleep as a result. I promised a quick price comparison. The product here on the left will go aforementioned, but I'm sure many people on here are pretty savvy, can pick up on who we are alluding to from the tall rinse standpoint. Those are your water-based solutions. Again, traditionally they're about $13, and they are about a 3 to 5 day supply for our moderate to severe sufferers of xerostomia. So by the time you buy 6 to 10 bottles, you're spending $80 to $130 a month. We talked about prescription calcium phosphate rinses. Your costs there rising upwards to $300 to $500 a month. And then Aquoral, this picture's a little deceiving, but there's actually 2 bottles that come in that box that are the 10 milliliters. It's intended to be a month supply. That's a month supply if you're using it roughly 4 to 6 times a day. Again, going back to some of our Sjogren's patients, they are in fact reaffirming that this product does last a month or longer. The retail price is $83 for that month supply. We do have a 3-month supply for $199, so a significant discount there. But I think more importantly, as it pertains to this audience, making sure that we use the NFOSD acronym for a code will get you a 15% discount. Prescriptions from your healthcare providers can either be faxed, phoned, or e-prescribed in. For my speech language pathologists, you can simply direct patients to our website, aquaralspray.com. There's a big pink button, get Aquoral now, right in the center of the page, cannot miss it. It will patch you through our telehealth provider. In about 3 minutes, you'll set up a medical profile. You'll answer 2 intake questions just to verify that the patient isn't allergic to any of the ingredients. And then they'll have the opportunity, very similar to e-commerce, to fill in this code, get that discount down to $70 for that month supply, and have the product via the mail in roughly 3 to 5 days. For any prescription writing healthcare professionals that are on here, we do always make the recommendation that a prescription be submitted PRN. That just means that the product can be refilled as many times as the patient would subsequently like for 12 months before the prescription would need to be updated. And finally, for any of those of you that are interested in dispensing at the point of care, we do have wholesale options to allow you to bring the product in-house. With that, I would like to graciously turn the presentation over to Jessica Greger. I had the pleasure of meeting her through some of the head and neck cancer nurses that also work alongside her at Mayo. And I got introduced to them by virtue of a radiation oncologist whose father was suffering from throat cancer. And we sent him some Aquoral. We got a message from his wife about a week later that he started to regain taste and he was starting to eat more nutritiously again as a result. So we got some nice introductions from that radiation oncologist to the Mayo team. And Jessica has been not only a great advocate for us, but also one that can speak more to how she's applied the product clinically.
Thanks, Bennett. It's great to be here. Thank you so much, too.
Very welcome. How do I, Elizabeth, sorry, turn this back over to Jessica so she can take the stage?
Yes, Jessica, would you like to share your screen?
I don't have any screen to share. I just wanted to help answer questions for any of the viewers who were looking to have clinical questions answered.
Excellent.
But I could definitely happily speak to how I'm recommending the product and what this looks like in the head and neck cancer population, because that's the primary population that I work with. And and the success that we're seeing using the product.
Excellent. And then Bennett, if you want to stop sharing your screen, your videos will get bigger. So
Okay.
if people see you better, up to you with that. If you want to keep your information up there longer, you can. Would it be okay if I started by asking a couple questions?
Please.
And either of you can jump in with this. There's a question here asking why there's any flavor included at all. Could you make a product that has no flavor?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The quick answer is we're currently researching how we can eliminate the mint grapefruit flavoring right now. The slightly longer answer is, in an effort to get it back to market as fast as possible, not changing the formula at all. So we didn't have to go back to the FDA, go through whatever rigorous hoops and hurdles they're going to make us jump through. That became the primary mission, was getting it back to the market quickly. So it's certainly something that we're getting a lot of encouraging feedback. And I would tell you, rather than changing the flavor, Elizabeth, to that person's question specifically, most patients and clinicians are asking us to just remove the flavor altogether.
Excellent, thanks for that. Related to the prescription, will there ever be an option for something that's over the counter that doesn't need a prescription to purchase this product?
I think I'm going to give a similar answer to the one that I just gave, based on this being approved by the FDA back in 2006. Not reapplying for it to become over the counter was the fastest way back to market. However, increasing the amount of production and therefore the ease with which people can get access to it, we are entertaining strategies that would allow us to take it from prescription to over the counter, which I'm not going to suggest is easy, but it is easier going from prescription to over the counter than it would be going over the counter to prescription.
Yes, yeah, for those of you that have dealt with the FDA, I'm sure you can relate to things related to that. It's not an easy road dealing with the FDA at times. Jessica, I have a question here for you.
Great.
I know you work a lot with head and neck cancer patients, but this one applies more generally to acute care patients and perhaps ICU specific. If patients are intubated, they oftentimes have dry mouth. Would this be something that would be appropriate to spray in the mouth of somebody that's intubated and sedated?
It's been a hot minute since I have worked in patient ICU, but from what I remember working in those teams, ICU patients are very special and they require very, critical care teams. And so I think if the speech pathologist or advocate for that product wanted to introduce it to the team and get all the doctor's blessings that would be okay for their patient, then perhaps you just want to make sure that you clear it with the ICU physician first. But for subacute, so they're out of the ICU, a lot of patients do have their spouses bring in their own, oral mouth moisturizing products that they've been using at home for comfort, just like they bring in their denture paste. And so, that would be something that you could definitely educate the patient and spouse on so they can get plugged in to trying out that product.
Excellent, thanks for that. I have another one here. So is there any value in doing a homemade bicarbonate of soda rinse? So they were taught to mix bicarbonate, salt, and water.
You mean just in general?
That's what it sounds like here, yes.
Okay, yeah. That is a common mixture that a lot of patients who are going through radiation do use, the variations of that. It's very relieving, it's very helpful, but it's not the same as using a mouth moisturizing product.
Excellent. And would soda, this is a follow-up question to that from the same person, would soda water be any better than still water? And I think they mean when mixing that together.
Oh, I don't know. I just know soda water is so much more interesting to swallow with the, carbonation than regular water. Huge fan of Topo Chico.
Same, yes. Another question here for either of you. Somebody who is asking whether the bottle is easy to spray. So if somebody has dexterity issues or upper extremity weakness, are they able to spray the bottle pretty easily?
Do you want me to go first, Bennett?
Yeah, please go ahead, take it with Jessica.
even if you had, weakness in using your finger to do the pump, you can easily push it down. It doesn't require, excessive strength to Bennett hit the nail on the head with Banaka reference. If you remember Banaka back in the day, it's very easy to pump, and it's just 2 pumps and the beads fall on your tongue and you start moving it around. It's very easy to use. It does not require a lot of strength.
I don't know if I can add anything better than that.
Good. Question here about whether this is being supplied in the hospital setting. So is it being prescribed to patients in the hospital for hospital use, or is it mostly being prescribed to outpatients? What's the makeup for that?
At Mayo currently, we're using it, from my understanding, as outpatient, both in the radiation oncology setting and in the ENT setting. I think that the future is open with inpatient, and that could be a next step we can explore. But right now, we're really excited to be getting this product to our head and neck cancer survivors, because there's a lot of other patient populations with dry mouth that would be very interesting to explore and see what can happen in the hospital setting.
Yeah, I think to just elaborate that on a little bit, without going down the political rabbit hole, if you will, it's much easier to get access to the patients through the outpatient pharmacy than it is the inpatient pharmacy. There's a substantial formulary process that many, if not all, of these institutions go through before deciding whether a product is worthy or not of being used for internal use. But what we can confidently say, at the various medical centers where the product is on site at the outpatient pharmacy, much like Jessica said, a lot of times a spouse will bring in a treatment regimen of their choice or their liking. Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so is walking down to the outpatient pharmacy, picking up some Aquoral, and then in fact delivering it back up to the room. So most of the treatment that those are going through occurs at the outpatient level and beyond as they transition back home. And so making sure that patients had access to it fairly easily from both perspectives, it made more sense to stick with the outpatient pharmacy for now.
Excellent. And we had a follow-up. You may have mentioned this during your presentation. Insurance does not cover this, is that correct?
Thank you for that question. I did not cover that, and I apologize. For the vast majority of us, unfortunately, it is a cash product. The quick history there is when Mission really started to commercially advertise the product in 2013, there was probably 20 to 30% worth of reimbursement. That quickly dwindled down to 3 to 5% worth of reimbursement by the time they discontinued it in 21. In order to set expectations, we're preparing patients that it will likely be a cash play. However, we are encouraging patients with traditional commercial coverage to submit. And I will tell you, some patients have come back to us and in fact told us that their carriers have picked it up. So there's some Cadillac plans that are picking it up. The slightly longer answer is we're working on it. We have submitted our Medicare Aquoral specific code. We should find out in July whether that application is approved or not. And then we will continue to take steps towards trying to get reimbursement so that access continues to become easier and easier for patients.
Excellent. On behalf of all the people that are using this product, thank you for doing that, for applying for that reimbursement. Question here for you. We do have people joining us from other countries. Is Aquoral available elsewhere? Specifically, we have questions. Is it available in Canada, and is it available in Australia?
It is available in Europe, which does not answer your question. We are working right now with a Canada-specific distributor and going through the process of getting the product approved with the Canada Health Organization. I am hopeful, fingers crossed, knock on wood, all that stuff, that it will be an easier process since the FDA has already blessed it originally. So to come soon, I'm gunning for a January 1 availability launch in Canada. As for Australia, unfortunately, no. However, we would be thrilled to engage in a conversation with the distributor there on how we could get the product, they could white label it, and we could open that market up. We would just need some boots on the ground, if you will, to help facilitate that effort.
Excellent, thank you. Question here, if you have any sort of flyers or handouts that the healthcare professionals on the call can give to their physicians to help encourage prescriptions for this.
We do. Elizabeth, there will be kind of a follow-up email to this presentation, I'm assuming. Okay, perfect. Yep, we've got a link that will supply everyone with a brochure, a single-page brochure that I would encourage you to use as far as bringing into your physicians. It has everything from product highlights to prescribing instructions. It also has all of the clinical white paper data that I alluded to in the presentation. And then for those of you that got tired of my voice or perhaps tuned me out, there's a voice recording presentation that's only about 10 minutes long, so someone can rewatch that entire presentation that I just gave.
Wonderful, excellent. Question here, follow up to that. Information is available. Do you have samples available?
Yeah, great question. We technically do not have professional samples. Our workaround is free trials, and we are doing so by using healthcare professionals writing a prescription for themselves, processing through that through our pharmacy, and then mailing that to their destination of choice. At that point, they can then administer the product to the patients that they see fit, get feedback live in person. So we're doing that from a perspective of making sure the clinical professionals get to actually touch and feel the product, advocate for its efficacy, and really pick which patients they deem most appropriate to be trialing the product with. So the answer is yes, with a caveat.
Okay, excellent. Jessica, I have a question for you. Could you elaborate a bit more on why stimulants might not be helpful for patients that have had severe damage to their salivary glands? Like salivary stimulants, if their saliva gland is so damaged that they're not able to produce saliva, where something like spray, like a moisturizer, is more appropriate than a stimulant for them?
Well, it kind of answers it. I mean, you can't stimulate something that's kind of broken and killed off from radiation or surgery, for example, but so you use something to compensate for it. I don't really have much more to add on that.
Yeah. Are you able to help patients know when their salivary glands have been damaged to the point where it can't be stimulated?
Yeah, we have to have some frank conversations sometimes, and that makes it tough. But usually we have a really good understanding of that patient's status because of all the healthcare professionals on the team working up the patient.
Excellent. And when you're working with patients that are beginning their treatment for head and neck cancer and throughout their treatment, how often are you asking them about dry mouth symptoms? And how do you do that?
Perfect question. So we have a care pathway that we have in place at Mayo. And so we see the patients before surgery, and we have like a complete evaluation for the patient, both clinical and video fluoroscopic, so we know exactly what we're working with. So we doing the clinical exam, check out mouth opening, salivary function, status, so forth. Everything that would be included in a clinical swallowing evaluation, then moving into the X-ray realm. And then we see the patient immediately post-op, and we do endoscopic evaluations at that time. Again, another clinical reassessment, checking on where they're at. And then we optimize their function before going into radiation, that adjuvant radiation. We do another evaluation right before the start of radiation. Then we work with them during radiation for proactive care. And then we see them all the way through. Sometimes they need additional help after radiation ends to get optimized again. And then we do another evaluation, including X-ray, 3 months after radiation ends, and then each year after that up to year 5 post-radiation, so that they are looking good going into survivorship. And dry mouth is and function on that is checked in at all those time point intervals.
Perfect. Do you have a specific assessment tool or screener tool that you use specific to xerostomia dry mouth?
There's a couple rating scales that the radiation oncology team already uses and uses for research. So it's it's readily available in the chart. And we have a couple different things that we gauge that for, but the most important thing when it comes for us is the patient already going into surgery or going into radiation with dry mouth, whether that's from some other concomitant problem that they have or medical diagnosis, like an autoimmune condition, rheumatologic condition, so forth, or if they've already had previous cancer treatments and have a recurrence and are going in again, or are going in for another surgery because of osteoradionecrosis and not necessarily a recurrence, but something else that they are going to have more surgery that potentially can impact the salivary glands and so forth.
Excellent, thank you. Do you ever have patients provide a saliva sample to you? And if so, what do you do with that?
We don't here at Mayo. I have been at conferences where over the years, I've been working for 15 years in head and neck, and I've met and seen, heard of clinics that do that. And there's even been weighted tests where they, use a cotton ball, saturate it, and weigh it, and it can get very, very technical, but we do not do that at Mayo.
Thank you. Yes, I've been part of a clinic once where they did do the cotton ball where they measured how many grams of saliva.
It was intense.
Yeah. A minute or so. Yeah, interesting. Thank you. A question here, Bennett, for you. What is the shelf life of Aquoral?
Great question. The current batch that we have manufactured is good until June of 2026. The only stipulation is that it be kept at room temperature. So this is good for 2 years, and we test it every quarter just to make sure that it continues to abide by our expectations.
Excellent. More specific question here. Is this product good for people that have lichen planus to help protect the tissue? And if you're not sure, that's okay.
Jessica, I don't know. You want to handle that one?
I'm familiar with lichen planus. I don't see why not.
Excellent. Yep. And our go-to.
There wouldn't be any contraindications for it.
Sure.
I just haven't known that as a direct use for that. That's great.
Excellent. The NFOSD runs a virtual support group, and this is a topic, dry mouth, that comes up almost every meeting. And we've heard some interesting responses from people in our support group about what they're using to manage their dry mouth. And one of the products that someone has mentioned recently was coconut oil. Have you ever heard of that?
I have, yeah.
Is that something that you recommend?
If it works for that patient, it's, coconut oil is not unsafe to ingest, so it works for them. There's so many home remedies, especially in the laryngectomy world, that if you go on blogs and you read about it, it's like, especially on Web Whispers, it's whatever works for that patient. That's awesome. I will say though, I mean, just working in this field for a while, there's a million over-the-counter products that you can find, and one of the neatest conversations I had was with a dentist who works only with radiation patients, and so he really understands the ins and outs of what radiation can do to your salivary glands and how it can affect the oral microbiome and dental health and so forth, and so many other things. And so he did an independent review of a bunch of the over-the-counter products and just found the vast majority to be garbage, just ineffective formulas and ingredients that cause a lot of GI upset, actually promoted cavities. And so it was really, devastating, because a lot of the items that he found that he reviewed were over-the-counter products I had been recommending for years. There was a list of top 5 that he felt were decent formula and decent ingredients that didn't have these side effects. I recommend those readily. I like those products, and I also love this product, Aquoral. So I want to make sure my patients have all the options to choose from. and trialing different ones to see which one really works best for them, not to intermix too many at the same time, because then it's hard to find out which one was the most effective one for them. But yeah, we kind of do it in a stepwise fashion of trialing, because sometimes the patient's coming in and that is their only pressing concern is, I have to figure out this dry mouth because it's driving me nuts, and it's really affecting my quality of life. And so we're on a hunt and we will figure it out.
How long do you usually have them try a certain product for before deciding whether they like it or if it works or not?
That's a great question. I personally like 5 days. I think 5 days is a good frame of time for them to really see if they like it. If they feel like it's not long enough, then try a week. But I think by a week's time, you have an idea of whether or not this is effective. But 3 days is not long enough. So I like 5.
So I want to be mindful of the time here, but I have another question that I'd like to ask for either of you. Bennett, you had mentioned, I think, that Aquoral is a lipid-based spray moisturizer, true? Are there any other lipid-based moisturizers on the market that you know of?
There are not. We own the patent, the worldwide patent at that. So if there are and someone finds out, I guess let me know so I can figure it out. But I think there's actually a lot of credence in both your previous question and Jessica's answer. I've heard of the DIY solutions, the coconut oils. I've heard olive oil. If that suits someone's palate and that alleviates their symptoms, then far from anyone to argue with them. So if it's working, keep running with it. And if you're in the category, like Jessica alluded to, of patients that are just knocking them down one after the other and they're not finding results, then that's where Aquoral just wants a seat at the table to be considered as a viable option for someone to try.
And I will also add, I mean, it's obviously not just swallowing and comfort, but it's also speech. There's a very helpful aspect, of course, having lubricated articulators so that patients can feel really good and confident about their speech. And so 2 birds with 1 stone.
Excellent. And sleep, I know, is one of those topics that comes up too. So
Definitely.
speech and sleep. Oh, excellent. Well, Jessica and Bennett, thank you so much for taking the time to volunteer tonight to share your expertise, to share this product with us. I think there were a lot of people on the call that got some new information that they're going to take away from this. We'll start to wrap up things here. I will be sending out an email this evening that has just a very brief 3-question survey requesting some feedback, welcoming your ideas for future topics for webinars. We would love for you to submit your feedback on this. I will share that with Jessica and Bennett. And with that, I guess while I'm here, I'll let you know June is Dysphagia Awareness Month. The foundation has a few awareness campaigns and initiatives going on. There's right now a t-shirt fundraiser, and there's 2 days left to purchase your t-shirt. I'll send a link out in that email as well if anybody would like a foundation t-shirt. But we also have some additional ways to get involved. So I will send that in the email as well if you're interested in participating. We'd love to get you involved. I know, Jessica, you're involved. Aquoral is involved as well. So thank you for that. And with that, have a great evening or a good morning wherever you're participating from. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Jessica, have a good one.
You too. Bye.